All right. So today I have the not so German coffee with the shitty discount coffee again, but it's been sitting up here for like 2 hours. My back is killing me right now. And I spent like maybe 2 hours just chilling on my chair, like stretching out my back. And honestly, it still needs a lot more work. But okay, it's warmer than I expected it to be. So it's not hot. And I want to figure out how to warm this shit up without burning it. This is the good coffee to do this with because generally darker roasts burn faster. So what we're going to do here is reduce our power level to 5, which is half. That's not... Oh, there we go. I'm learning how to do this. And then we'll just put it in for a minute. And see if that burns it. Oh shit. So we did 5 seconds at full power because I didn't realize the microwave could do that. It did multiple power settings in one. That's fine. So I know a minute at 100% is too much. It'll burn the coffee. We're gonna find out what's not too much. And that's being too much is kind of what I want to talk about a little bit today. I'm paying attention to the comments. I'm gonna focus on being more focused. Today we're talking about Jesus Christ. I feel like this is one of those things that I could stay focused and talk about for 3 hours straight. So I'm gonna try and keep it to one thing specifically, which is balance, right? So I have mostly avoid talking about him a lot for several reasons. And I think one of the biggest reasons is just that I don't want to scare people away, right? I want oh, my message to be received by the largest number of people. It's kind of warm and not burnt. So let's do another 20 seconds at 50% power. See if that gets us where I want to go. A lot of it has been testing the waters recently, similar to the way I'm testing how much power it takes this coffee. It takes to get this coffee to the temperature I want it to be without burning it. I want to spread people the message of truth and love without scaring them away before I even really get started, you know? And I'm going to start by saying I don't claim to have any special knowledge or anything, but I have read the Bible, particularly the New Testament, a lot. All right, that's enough for now. Good enough that putting the milk in it shouldn't make it cold, the cream. So we're going to keep talking about this while I make the coffee with the cream, a little bit of brown sugar, and so the first aspect is I don't want to scare people off because the people who need to hear the message the most are the people who hear the name Jesus Christ and run away, right? So that's part of it. The second part is I was being a little bit of a coward too, you know, where there's two aspects of why. The The first aspect is the way that a lot of rock bands and metal bands don't want to be labeled as Christian rock or Christian metal, because then you get pushed to the side. You get ostracized. You don't get radio play. You don't get any of that stuff, you know? You get pushed into that little group. And often it's a group that doesn't even accept you, right? Because ironically, a lot of Christians, despite Jesus spreading a message of love and acceptance, end up being some of the most closed-minded and most judgmental people I've ever known. It's really frustrating for me. So you get kind of forced into this little niche, and the niche itself doesn't even accept you. So I was worried about that. If I spent too much time talking about spirituality, I want to be clear, I'm not religious per se. I think religion is mostly a cult designed to be opium for the masses, to keep them working in miserable conditions and convince them that it's all right, that they're not happy now because they're going to be happy later. Now, I do believe that there is an afterlife. I don't claim to know what that is, but my belief states that those who accept God into their life, whether it's through Jesus or another of his prophets, I don't make distinctions really, especially among the Abrahamic faiths, which, if you're not aware, that's Judaism, Muslims, and Christianity. Islam would be the appropriate, the same context there. Oh, my back. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but it just cracked. So I find it especially frustrating that the three faiths that have literally the same foundation are the three that seem to hate each other the most. And even within Christianity, you have those divisions like Protestants and is it Catholics that go at each other in Ireland or used to do that. It's just really frustrating for me. So part of it was like the fear of being attacked by other faithful and even other Christians. And then part of it was the fear of being like shucked into this little corner where no one's going to listen to my message anymore, except Charlie. He's always begging for attention. He doesn't even care what I say as long as I'm talking to him, right, Kat? It's been without fail that every time I start doing this, he hears me and he's like, "Let me inside." What's up, Charlie? So the third thing is, and what I really want to focus on right now, is I don't think that most people really have a true perspective of who Jesus was, because so much of his image, like everything these days, has been sanitized to the point where it lost all flavor. You know, that's why all these videos, games, and movies are flopping, even though they're putting $500 million budgets into them, because they're so afraid to offend anyone that they aren't saying anything of substance anymore. It's all just pointless, tasteless fluff, and no one's interested in that. Interestingly enough, controversy drives interest. You want to look at the big games recently. You had Schedule One, where you're a drug dealer. That's literally what it's all about. Uh, More of a niche, but definitely driven to a more popular audience than it would have ever been observed by before. You have Ready or Not, which is where you're basically a SWAT team member. And one of the things that drove the controversy about that game was that there's a school shooter scenario. And I think it's kind of crazy that people got upset about that because you're the good guy, right? You're going in and stopping the school shooting. So why are people upset about that? Well, probably the same reason that the cops in Uvalde just stood out front for 40 minutes while someone ran around and killed a bunch of kids. Like, if someone like me had been driving by and heard the gunshots and tried to run in there to save the kids would have shot me for trying to save the kids. I mean, the cops would have shot me for trying to save the kids, right? They're like, no, sorry, we gotta wait here until it's bad enough that the whole country can hear about it so we can disarm the populace and make them comply. Okay, I went maybe a little too tinfoil hat there for a moment. But my point is that Jesus was controversial, arguably the most controversial figure that ever existed. And yes, he's known as the Prince of Peace, but most people don't understand that generally, to achieve true peace, you need to first go to war. And it's a war against evil, right? I don't think a lot of people, there are some of my good friends that have said they don't believe in good or evil. And that's just unfathomable to me. I don't understand that from even a philosophical point, let alone a spiritual one. I pray for them because if you don't acknowledge something, then it's impossible for you to defend yourself against it, right? So if you don't believe in evil, you can't protect yourself against it. You're just not prepared to fight against it. So I hope someday that friend in particular I'm thinking of pulls his head out of the sand and learns to fight against evil. And here's the thing. The more the other thing is the other thing that I was afraid of, I guess, was really pissing off and creating a divide between me and the people I love in my life. Not just my friends, but my family too. I have no doubt I've been pissing off a lot of my family lately because I was always the relatively quiet, non-confrontational type. I used to be a bit of a fence sitter. I've always had a sense for justice and a strong moral compass, but I really saw myself with generally a hands-off policy. I wouldn't get involved unless someone asked me to arbitrate. And usually that meant that evil would win, right? Because here's the thing, good doesn't really care to bother with the vast majority of people. It's kind of just interested in doing its own thing. And if you don't want to come along for the ride, that's fine. It's your funeral. Whereas evil is exactly the opposite. Evil needs to dominate and maintain control and reach into your life and tell you how to live it, which is ironically what I see a lot of Christians doing right now. They're trying to run around and tell other people how to live their life. And don't get me wrong, I'm commenting on a lot of social trends I see, but regardless of what I might say that's negative about some public figure, I still respect their ability to choose and define their own life. I'm just pointing it out as an example of I don't know if this is good for your soul type stuff. It could have been a little warmer, but it's warm enough that the milk didn't make it cold, you know? It's like lukewarm coffee at this moment. I like my coffee piping hot. If my tongue isn't curling up in my mouth and shriveling due to the heat, it's not hot enough. So I've always been low key a very extreme person like that. You know, people don't understand how much heat I can bring to a situation. And that's my fault, right? Because when I was very young, I was basically beaten into submission by society. I was the strange, weird kid that had neurodivergent tendencies and lateral thinking. And I would be the one person in the room of 20 that had a differing opinion. And the teachers who would say, "Oh, it's been 10 years, we've done it this way, blah, blah, blah." And eventually I gave up, you know? I'm not giving up ever again. I don't care what it costs me at this point, even if it costs me my friends and my family. Because here's the thing, I've been going back, and I haven't read it in several years. Last time I read the Bible was during COVID. I actually read, um, well, I think I've read a little bit since then, but it was just here and there. Last time I read it consistently was during COVID. I went and I streamed myself reading the entire New Testament on Twitch, which was one of the scariest things I've ever done, right? I was sure it would bring all kinds of hate and stuff, but mostly it was just a couple people showing up that were thankful. I recall one person saying he was showed up specifically to troll me and then he just didn't couldn't do it anymore, which that felt pretty good, right? But here's the thing. Jesus himself said, "I did not come to bring peace but the sword." And I don't remember the whole quote. I don't want to misquote it. But basically, he talks about how accepting him into your life, or I would say accepting any type of spiritual elevation, whether it's Judaism or Islam or some non Abrahamic religion like Sikhism, Buddhism, regardless. Anytime you seek to level up your spirituality, the rest of the world is going to be offended by that and try and drag you down. And the primary reason is by doing your best to become a better person, you make the rest of them look bad for not trying. Now, there are also people that are just going to disagree philosophically, but then you have to ask how much time they've actually spent thinking about things and whether or not they're just repeating a narrative. And that's what I run into the most. All these people that are saying I'm wrong about Christianity. I've been getting into it with some other Christians on the internet lately. They say I'm wrong, and they always have two things happen. One, they start projecting. I'm not going to say the name because I'm still hoping we can resolve this and come to some type of at least understanding or respectful conclusion. But I've been talking back and forth with this other content creator on one of his YouTube community posts, and he accused me of being dangerously closed-minded, and the reason why is because I told him it's not Christians' job to legislate morality. And I do believe that it's necessary for humans in general to legislate boundaries. For example, murder is wrong. If someone's going to be breaking into your house and killing you, it's absolutely the responsibility of the government, whether that's a spiritual government or not, to make sure that doesn't happen and to punish the people who do that simply to protect society, not necessarily as a form of judgment, but if you keep letting these people out, they're going to keep doing it. I was watching a video on stream last night of some, I don't even want to call her a woman. She was 26 years old, but when we were watching the TikToks, I swear to God, I thought she was like 17 or 19 based off the way she was acting. Just some immature, evil piece of shit. She got sent home from McDonald's, so she came back with a knife and stabbed her manager to death. Her manager was a 15-year veteran of McDonald's with 6 children, the mother of 6 children. And this woman, this girl, came and killed that woman just because the woman sent her home from work because she was goofing around, making TikToks in the playground during her break. If she was even on a break. She said she was on a break, but it's a non-trustworthy narrator in that case, right? She has all of this content where she's posting a whole bunch of edgy, objectionable shit, and that's fine. But she's also going out and calling herself a good person. I feel like if you need to go and tell people you're a good person, if you need to go tell someone you're a king, if you need to go tell someone you're humble, it means you're exactly not that. Because people will see it through your actions. If you need to rely on words to create that narrative, then it's a false narrative. And the craziest thing about this whole situation is that girl had a history of stabbing people, but she received a suspended sentence. A suspended sentence means that you have been found guilty, but you're not going to serve any time unless you fail to keep up with your parole or you commit another crime. So this girl was a known threat to society, and yet they just let her keep going, walking around, and now there are 6 poor children that have to grow up without their mother because of this. So it is absolutely necessary to set boundaries, and I believe our own individual morality is going to, and principles are going to inform that. But I don't believe that anyone has the right to legislate what goes on in someone's private home, as long as it's between consenting adults and all of that, and the whole issue that stemmed this situation was the censorship of Steam and itch.io through Visa and MasterCard. And this content creator basically made a whole video talking about how he was like happy that people had all this stuff get shut down and taken from them. I've never seen so much joy at the expense of someone. Well, that's not true, but it's been a long time since I've seen so much joy at the expense of someone else. Straight up Schadenfreude. And you know, when I was growing up, one of the songs we used to sing in like church choir and stuff was "They will know we are Christians by our love." Well, I don't see many Christians leading with love anymore. It seems like a lot of them are choosing hate instead. And I don't really have a problem with any of those porn games as long as it's all consenting adults and stuff. And the crazy thing too is a lot of the games that got delisted weren't even NSFW or not like porn content. They were, some of them just dealt with heavy concepts like suicide, or some of them were more weird, like furry stuff. And like for me, all furry content is sexual content, but furries claim otherwise. But regardless, whether it's sexual content or not, again, as long as they're consenting adults, like just let them wear those weird, stinky ass furry suits, do whatever makes them happy, as long as they're not harming anyone else. And then you know what? If it is a sin, then they can talk to God about that when they meet him. That's the way I see it. So the one thing that I'm really still struggling with a little bit is how much is too much. Exactly, like I was struggling to figure out how much heat is too much for the coffee. Because while Jesus does teach us to always lead with love and be kind and forgive, he also would go no holds barred sometimes. He was the original table flipper, or at the very least, he made it a meme. He made table flipping fashionable. He would go up to his religious and political leaders of the time and call them snakes and liars to their faces. So, leading with love doesn't mean, and being kind doesn't mean just always deferring and being conflict avoidant. In fact, it's the opposite, right? You got to call that bullshit out when you see it. But that's definitely a slippery slope because it can lead into spiraling rage. So I'm still working on finding the balance, is what I'm saying. I'm just doing my best to speak from the heart and call out bullshit when I see it. And I also want to give props where I see it today, but we also want to give props where I see it. But today we're more focused on just finding the balance, you know? It can be difficult. And I've got a lot of catching up to do with messages. I read some of the YouTube comments last night, and we're going to be streaming tonight because it's Thursday. Friday is the day that I do administrative stuff and chores. I'm going to really focus a lot on Friday on reading a lot of the comments on my recent videos and trying to respond to some and responding to some stuff. I also got family and friends. I got a message back entirely unrelated to my content. If you've been watching my content and wondering why I'm not responding, it's just because I'm working really hard right now. And it's hard for me to mentally shift gears. You know, when I'm in work mode, I'm in work mode. And I've been in work mode for a very long time because it feels like I'm beating my head against the brick wall, but I don't want to stop because I know there's forces working against me that are repairing that brick wall every time I make the slightest little crack in it. So if I seem relatively hard headed recently, that's a fair observation because I'm trying to make this giant forehead hard enough to break through the brick wall. I'm not trying, I'm working on it. And I think that's the true essence of Jesus Christ, regardless of whether you are of a different faith. Just being bold enough and unapologetic enough to say, I'm going to do the right thing, even if the world is forcing me to do otherwise. And really, hey, Kat, and really do the, no, don't stop the video. I'm not done yet. Really do the most you can to reach out to people, but at the same time, you need to accept that some people just aren't willing to grow. They want to stay sick because staying sick is way easier than getting better, especially when the reason you're sick in the first place is your own cowardice, your own fear of being judged. I just don't give a fuck anymore. And I'm loving stronger and harder than ever. But I'm also finding that the more I do this, the more pushback I receive. And it's heartbreaking. I'm not sure how many people I'm going to lose in my life, maybe all of them. But I do hope that new ones will enter it who have a similar mentality. And even if they don't, like I said it multiple times in my last video, at the very least, when I meet God face to face, I'll be able to tell him I did my best. And I'm not hiding behind anonymity or philosophy anymore. While it is always philosophy, I'm a spiritual philosopher, you know? I use philosophy as a secular shield for a long time, but in reality, true philosophy requires an approach to spirituality as well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be atheist or agnostic. Those are their own forms of spirituality. So, I'm open to listening to all conversations, and I just want to convince everyone to love each other better, because that's what the real message is. You know, people used to ask Jesus all these questions, and eventually someone asked him, "What's the most important thing?" And he said, "If you can do nothing else, follow the commandments, and I give you this one more: love your neighbor as you love yourself." And if you don't love yourself, you need to start there and figure out why you don't love yourself, and stop blaming all that shit on the outside world, you know? That's the most common thing I see with people that don't love themselves. You start asking them why they don't love themselves, and they're like, "Oh, because of the economy." I'm like, the economy has nothing to do with your own eternal love. Yeah, the economy sucks, and it's only getting worse, but that's beyond your control. So, if the economy is really what's fucking up your life, then good luck, because you're screwed. But the reality is it's their reaction to the economy, and you need to learn to handle your own shit, to conquer your own emotions, or you're gonna end up like that stupid evil bitch that stabbed a mother of six to death because she got sent home from work early. It's just such an insane thing that we live in a world where that's not even, where, let alone is that possible, but it's basically accepted, because you just get a slap on the wrist, get some probation and a suspended sentence, and go out and are allowed to do it again. I I'm not gonna stay silent and let that bullshit happen anymore, regardless of who has a problem with my opinion. I'm always open to have a respectful and honest conversation with people. But the moment people start telling me, "Oh, you're just dangerously close minded," or "it's obvious why this is a sin," and they can't explain to me why, I know you're just either very well programmed and don't have a single original thought in your own head, or you are a slave to the devil, and you're just doing your best to disenfranchise and lead the world, to disenfranchise good people and lead the world down an evil path. I won't stand for it. And that's all I really have to say at this point. This ended up being longer than the previous video. I did tell you I could go like 3 hours on this topic, but I also feel like I stayed locked in the whole time. I had two little tangents, but both of them were things that I intentionally set up to use as examples: the coffee and the stabbing. The world is becoming an increasingly dark place, And I just see that as all the more reason that I need to start burning brighter. And I hope some of y'all decide to start burning brighter too. I'm going to go work on the basement a little bit. I'll be live later, probably in the middle of the night, because as you can see, the sun's already down and it's starting to get dark here, but it's not pitch dark like it was last night. So, just want to say, if you want to stop by the stream, awesome. I'd love to have you. If not, I'll see you in the next one. I love all of you, and God bless. Cheers.